rotation is the leftmost letter. That will be important later on. Anyway, a list of all possible sequences of allowed rotations that are finite in length is, well, huge. Countably infinite, in fact. But if we apply each one of them to a starting point, in green here, and then name the point we land on after the sequence that brought us there, we can name a countably infinite set of points on the surface. Let's look at how, say, these 4 strings on our list would work. Right, up, left. Okay, rotating the starting point this way takes us here. Let's color code the point based on the final rotation in its string. In this case, it's left, and for that we will use purple. Next up, down, down. That sequence takes us here. We name the point DD and color it blue since we ended with a down rotation. RDR, that will be this point's name, takes us here, and for a final right rotation, let's use red. Finally, for a sequence that ends with up, let's color code the point orange. Now, if we imagine completing this process for every single sequence, we will have a countably infinite number of points named and color coded. That's great, but not enough. There are an uncountably infinite number of points on a sphere's surface. But no worries, we can just pick a point we missed, any point, and color it green, making it a new starting point, and then run every sequence from here. After doing this to an uncountably infinite number of starting points, we will have indeed named and colored every single point on the surface just once. With the exception of poles. Every sequence has 2 poles of rotation, locations on the sphere that come back to exactly where they started. For any sequence of right or left rotations, the poles are the north and south poles. The problem with poles like these is that more than one sequence can lead us to them. They can be named more than once, and be colored in more than one color. For example, if you follow some other sequence to the north or south pole, any subsequent rights or lefts will be equally valid names. In order to deal with this, we're going to just count them out of the normal scheme and color them all yellow. Every sequence has 2, so there are a countably infinite amount of them. Now, with every point on the sphere given just one name and just one of 6 colors, we are ready to take the entire sphere apart. Every point on the surface corresponds to a unique line of points below it all the way to the center point, and we will be dragging every point's line along with it. The lone center point we will set aside. Okay, first we cut out and extract all the yellow poles, the green starting points, the orange up points, the blue down points, and the red and purple left and right points. That's the entire sphere. With just these pieces, you can build the whole thing. But take a look at the left piece. It is defined by being a piece composed of every point accessed via a sequence ending with a left rotation. If we rotate this piece right, that's the same as adding an R to every point's name. But left and then right is a backtrack. They cancel each other out. And look what happens when we reduce them away. The set becomes the same as a set of all points with names that end with L, but also U, D, and every point reached with no rotation. That's the full set of starting points. We have turned less than a quarter of the sphere into nearly 3/4 just by rotating it. We added nothing. It's like the hyperwebster. If we add the right piece and the poles of rotation in the center point, well, we've got the entire sphere again, but with stuff left over. To make a second copy, let's rotate the up piece down. The down-ups cancel because, well, it's the same as going nowhere, and we're left with a set of all starting points, the entire up piece, the right piece, and the left piece. But there's a problem here. We don't need this extra set of starting points. We still haven't used the original ones. No worries, let's just start over. We can just move everything from the up piece that turns into a starting point when rotated down. That means every point whose final rotation is up. Let's put them in the down piece. Of course, after rotating, points named UU will just turn into points named U, and that would give us a copy here and here. So as it turns out, we need to move all points with any name that is just a string of U's. We will put them in the down piece and rotate the up piece down, which makes it congruent to the up, right, and left pieces. Add in the down piece along with some up and the starting point piece, and, well, we're almost done. The poles of rotation and center are missing from this copy, but no worries. There's a countably infinite number of holes where the poles of rotation used to be, which means there is some pole around which we can rotate this sphere such that every pole hole orbits around without hitting another. Well, this is just a bunch of circles with one point missing. We fill them each like we did earlier, and we do the same for the center point. Imagine a circle that contains it inside the sphere and just fill in from infinity. And look what we've done. We have taken one sphere and turned it into two identical spheres without adding anything. 1 + 1 = 1. That took a while to go through, but the implications are huge, and mathematicians, scientists, and philosophers are still debating them. Could such a process happen in the real world? I mean, it can happen mathematically, and math allows us to abstractly predict and describe a lot of things in the real world with amazing accuracy. But does the Banach-Tarski paradox take it too far? Is it a place where math and physics separate? We still don't know. History is full of examples of mathematical concepts developed in the abstract that we did not think would ever apply to the real world for years, decades, centuries, until eventually science caught up and realized they were totally applicable and useful. The Banach-Tarski paradox could actually happen in our real world. The only catch, of course, is that the 5 pieces you cut your object into aren't simple shapes. They must be infinitely complex and detailed. That's not possible to do in the real world, where measurements can only get so small and there's only a finite amount of time to do anything. But math says it's theoretically valid, and some scientists think it may be physically valid too. There have been a number of papers published suggesting a link between Banach-Tarski and the way tiny subatomic particles can collide at high energies and turn into more particles than we began with. We are finite creatures. Our lives are small and can only scientifically consider a small part of reality. What's common for us is just a sliver of what's available. We can only see so much of the electromagnetic spectrum. We can only delve so deep into extensions of space. Common sense applies to that which we can access. But common sense is just that, common. If total sense is what we want, we should be prepared to accept that we shouldn't call infinity weird or strange. The results we've arrived at by accepting it are valid, true within the system we use to understand, measure, predict, and order the universe. Perhaps the system still needs perfecting. But at the end of the day, history continues to show us that the universe isn't strange. We are. And as always, thanks for watching. Finally, as always, the description is full of links to learn more. There are also a number of books linked down there that really helped me wrap my mind kind of around Banach-Tarski. First of all, Leonard Wapner's The Pea and the Sun. This book is fantastic, and it's full of a lot of the preliminaries needed to understand the proof that comes later. He also talks a lot about the ramifications of what Banach-Tarski and their theorem might mean for mathematics. Also, if you want to talk about math and whether it's discovered or invented, whether it really truly will map onto the universe, Yanofsky's The Outer Limits of Reason is great. This is the favorite book of mine that I've read this entire year. Another good one is E. Brian Davies' Why Beliefs Matter. This is actually Korn's favorite book, as you might be able to see there. It's delicious and full of lots of great information about the limits of what we can know and what science is and what mathematics is. If you love infinity and math, I cannot more highly recommend Matt Parker's Things to Make and Do in the Fourth Dimension. He is hilarious, and this book is very, very great at explaining some pretty awesome things. So keep reading, and if you're looking for something to watch, I hope you've already watched Kevin Lieber's film on Field Day. I already did a documentary about Whittier, Alaska over there. Kevin's got a great short film about putting things out on the internet and having people react to them. There's a rumor that Jake Roper might be doing something on Field Day soon. So check out mine, check out Kevin's, and subscribe to Field Day for upcoming Jake Roper action, yeah? He's actually in this room right now. Say hi, Jake.
Hi.
Thanks for filming this, by the way.
You're welcome.
Guys, I really appreciate who you all are. And as always, thanks for watching. Stack the halves on top of one another in order, like this, to create a beautiful tiered dessert. Because you have an infinite number of thinner and thinner slices, when you're done stacking them, the cake's vertical height will be endless. Such a cake has an interesting mathematical property. Its volume, the amount of cake it contains, is clearly no different than the amount you started with, but its surface area is infinite. It's a cake you can eat, but not frost. You would need an infinite amount of frosting to cover the whole thing with a uniform coat. An object with finite volume, but infinite surface area doesn't need to be endlessly tall, by the way. There are bounded supersolids, like this cube with an infinite number of smaller and smaller circular holes. Of course, building these objects in the real world comes with some obvious difficulties. One is the fact that the amount of steps required to complete the construction of Gabriel's cake or any other supersolid is literally infinitely many. And infinity isn't a number that, you eventually get to. It means unending. There will always be a next step, another piece to slice in half again. By definition, an infinite sequence of tasks has no last task. So you could never finish making a supersolid. Or could you? Enter the super task. What if, instead of taking the same amount of time to complete each step, we accelerated as we worked and did each step in half the time as the last? For example, let's say you want to make Gabriel's cake in just 2 minutes. Well, that's easy. First, cut the original cake in half and then wait a minute before making the second cut. Wait half a minute before making the third, a quarter of a minute before the fourth, and so on. Always waiting for half of what's left to pass before cutting again. Since you can keep dividing in half forever, there will always be another step. Infinite actions within a finite amount of time is a super task. The strange thing, of course, is that while supertasking, no matter how many steps you've already completed, there will always be an infinite amount of steps ahead. But yet, when time's up, you will have finished all of them. What we've just described is similar to Zeno's famous paradox of the dichotomy, in which the Greek hero Achilles runs a short race that he can clearly finish. I mean, people finish races all the time, but how exactly it's finished is a mystery. Because first, Achilles must cover half of the race's distance. and then half of what's left, and half again, and again, and again, since there will always be another halfway point to reach, the number of subdivisions is infinite, there is no final destination, after which Achilles' next stop is the finish line. But yet, Achilles obviously can finish. He somehow reaches them all, despite the fact that during his journey he always has an infinite number of steps left to reach. Think about it this way. What if at each halfway step along the way, Achilles is required to hold up a flag, at even steps a blue flag, and at odd steps a red flag? Blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, the flags will alternate faster and faster, but when Achilles finishes the race, which flag will he be holding up? To be holding up either flag would seem to suggest that a largest number not only exists, but is either even or odd. Now, to this, it is often suggested that the real problem is that Achilles isn't actually doing infinitely many things. He's just taking a few strides or whatever. A true super task.
Fuck you, Antoine! Pussy shit seed, bitch, motherfucker! I'm the best in the game! Fuck you, pussy!
But even if Achilles ran the race in a staccato fashion, stopping at each halfway point for half as long as he waited at the last one, the scenario would still be sensical and logical and would complete in a finite amount of time. It has even been shown how a staccato runner could move to avoid discontinuous velocities and accelerations. The point is, fine, infinite distinct actions